Hello, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. I'm Cosmos Dar, and this is Extraordinary America. What is Extraordinary America about? You see, American identity is about freedom, the opportunity for a better life, and the pursuit of happiness. However, most Americans are not free when it comes to the financial front. Most Americans are suffering from financial slavery due to loss of jobs, stagnant wages, inflation, and debt of all kinds. Wealth and income inequality runs rampant across America, and the middle class is all but disappeared. So what is Extraordinary America about? Extraordinary America is about the abolition of financial slavery. It is about the financial freedom of the 99%. It is about the nation of immigrants and descendants of immigrants awakening and unleashing the extraordinary within themselves and setting themselves free. The path to financial freedom is through entrepreneurship and investing on the light side. It is about financial education, not only when it comes to money in the monetary systems, but also in regards to how to start a business, investing, especially when it comes to precious metals and real estate. In this podcast, I interview guests, many of whom came from humble beginnings, to see how they did it and how they attained financial freedom in their own lives and how they did business. And it is my hope that you will be inspired and you will want to awaken extraordinary within yourselves and realize the American dream. Once again, welcome to Extraordinary America. Welcome back to the show, my fellow Extraordinary Americans. For today's guest, we have Julio Barreto Jr. Julio is an entrepreneur, CEO, mindset coach, as well as keynote and motivational speaker. He is the CEO of Barreto Real Estate and Development Corp. LLC, as well as Barreto Construction Services LLC. Julio became an entrepreneur later in life after reinventing himself following his latest bout with a chronic illness. Originally from the Bronx, he spent a majority of his professional career in politics, starting in Hispanic-related civil rights advocacy and then representing local governments in a variety of areas, culminating in a focus on housing and community development. His areas of expertise include, but are not limited to, civil rights, immigration, crime, policing, education, economic development, and housing. He currently works with a developer in West Baltimore, helping individuals and families become first-time homebuyers and guide new or novice real estate investors. He recently became certified as a fireman instructor and is committed to assisting individuals and families learn how to protect themselves up to and including the use of firearms for self-defense. Julio is what I would call an extraordinary American, and I'm honored to have him on the show. Julio, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am. How are you? Great to be here. Appreciate the opportunity.
No, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me, Julio. I'm really honored to have you on the show.
Thank
Um,
you. Thank you. You're being kind.
so Julio, I know that you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you have been in the political arena. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about you yourself and your background and how you got started?
Sure. I'm a native of the Bronx. My folks are from Puerto Rico. Interesting story about my parents. My dad came to New York from Puerto Rico to actually meet his dad. My grandparents my paternal grandparents separated when my dad was two. Came up here, met my mother. 3 months later, they got married. 74 years later, they're still married. So it's a really
Wow.
great story. And so I grew up in the Bronx. I'm a New Yorker through and through. Um, Went through Catholic high school, Catholic educated from fourth grade on, basically. And after high school, I realized I needed to, if I really wanted to find myself, I had to leave New York. Um, and I'm an individual. Even though I try and plan things, when I look back at my life, there were certainly just circumstances that just sort of happened that turned out to be blessings in disguise. So I was a C student all my life. I realized later in life that I loved to learn. I just did not like school. And so when it came to college, my criteria for college was really simple. The first school that accepted me, that was the furthest away, was the one that I was going to. So I ended up outside of Rochester, New York, at a state school called Brockport State. Didn't know really what I wanted to study. I knew part of my mission, my purpose in life really was to help people, and studied social work. Decided to get a master's degree outside of Philadelphia. I was actually pursuing 2 master's degrees. And in between the 2 masters, I decided I wanted to be a writer and ended up coming down to DC, got an internship, and that got me into politics, eventually got me into politics. And then in my life hasn't been the same since.
Wow. So Julio, like what is the what like like what is like the motivational factor and the journey that took you from like high school to politics and also like from there into entrepreneurship? If you could tell the audience a little bit more about that journey.
I think that I thought I was going to be a football star, but I wasn't as talented or really as confident as I needed to be to maximize my talents. But through the experiences in high school, I realized that my purpose in life was to help people. And but again, I thought that I needed to get away from New York. And so getting away from New York gave me a chance really to grow up and just learn um, how to take care of myself, basically. And while I was in college, I was active, as a student. One of my passions is I believe that people should be treated fairly. I don't have to agree or disagree with what you believe or what you do, but as long as you're treated fairly, I'm okay with the life that you want to live. And so I became very active with student government. I started a student group called Association of Latin American Students at Brockport for an opportunity for Latin American students to kind of coalesce and really, learn how to deal with being away in college. Because for me, I grew up in the projects in the Bronx, so going away to college was a big deal. Interacting with where I interacted a lot with working class and working poor families. That was the environment I grew up in. All of a sudden, dealing with middle class and other higher income individuals, it was a learning adjustment. And when I went down to study social work, I knew I didn't want to get a job right away out of college. I wasn't ready. I went to Bryn Mawr College, was pursuing I knew I wanted to combine law with social policy somehow. Didn't want to go to law school for either of those. Again, academically, I'm not a very good test taker. And after the first master's, they couldn't tell me what social workers did in a way that made sense to me. And just out of the blue, I decided I wanted to be a writer. Came down to Washington. Was actually on the road to pursue a career in journalism in California, but I was dating a young lady for about 6 months at that time. And I knew if I left that the relationship was going to go nowhere. And so I stuck around, got this policy job doing Hispanic civil rights advocacy. And she and I will celebrate 40 years next year. But my introduction to politics
Congratulations.
was, thank you,
That,
thank you, thank you.
that was
So,
that was like a pivotal. That was like
it was a pivotal decision, no question about it. And the gentleman who hired me it was with the Hispanic Civil Rights Group. To this day, he's the only individual that when I met him, as he walked away, I said, I have to get to know this guy. So he was my political mentor. And my introduction to politics was the last time the country passed an immigration bill, working with him, helped him get that bill passed. So I got introduced to politics at a very high level. And then I spent about 25 years doing the civil rights work. I had a chance to go to Cuba. I've really been blessed with just a tremendous opportunity, particularly at a young age. Eventually represented local government. In the course of all that, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is a chronic intestinal illness. So I've had 3 surgeries. I've lost about 30 inches of my intestines, and it's actually been one of the biggest blessings of my life. And so the last job that I had was let go primarily for the health-related reasons. And so I had to do something. And that's when I met a gentleman, got involved in real estate, and things kind of snowballed from there. And then because of my involvement, unfortunately, some of the areas that we work with in Baltimore are not the safest areas in the world. So that's when I decided to take advantage of my interest in firearms and got a concealed carry permit and just realized that I have a passion for teaching and that there are a lot of people who want to learn how to responsibly use firearms. So I got myself certified and I'm now transitioning into actually teaching people how to be aware of their environments, that they're in a situation with, for example, a mass shooter situation, that they know how to act, they know how to respond and can protect themselves.
So Julio, this is one question I would want to ask you of all people, because you've been into politics and you've also been into real estate, and a lot of people that go into politics, for instance, they start off with ideals, right, and then they soon
Right.
realize how human nature works, and
Right.
they go into real estate development, and then they see the shady side of the world. So my question to you is like, what is the biggest lesson of human nature you have learned over all your years? Like being in all these arenas.
You know, I often think of advice that a mentor gave me. And he said, Julio, you always have to remember that we are simply children in adult bodies. People are children in adult bodies. And at the end of the day, what do children want? They want their way. And so you have to understand that as a foundation in working with people, right? Now, I believe we live in the greatest country in the world. I think that we're a country that went from enslaving people to electing a gentleman whose ancestors were enslaved. And that's pretty powerful, right? You don't have to agree with the politics, but that's pretty powerful. And so I think that people, when you're dealing with people, you need to understand that they want their way, and sometimes, again, as children, you have to guide them along to help them understand how they can get their way. However, they need to understand there are certain responsibilities that come with wanting to get their way, if you will. So in politics, people are quick to speak about their rights, but they don't want to take the time to understand the responsibility that comes with the rights. Right? Because if you don't have, if you without responsibility, rights mean nothing, and you'll lose your rights. Right? In this whole political environment, I used to get in trouble for saying this. I used to travel throughout the country, and I would tell people, if you're frustrated with what you see in Washington, you need to look in the mirror, because the craziness in Washington is a reflection of the craziness of the person you see in the mirror. Because we voted them there, we put them in there. Now you might say, well, I didn't vote for that crazy. No, you voted for the other crazy, right? We're each pointing fingers at each other. And until people are willing to change, which is the key to any level of success, you got to be willing to go outside of your box. You're not going to see anything different happen in Washington. And because people aren't responsible, what happens when you don't teach responsibilities to a child? They become irresponsible adults. And I think in the political arena, you're seeing irresponsible adults on both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. Irresponsibility is very bipartisan. And so there was a time I was introduced to politics during the Ronald Reagan years, and Democrats and Republicans, they each understood the big picture, which is what we call America, the United States of America. And they always kept the big picture in mind, and they always knew when to sacrifice self for the big picture. Nowadays, people don't want to sacrifice self for the big picture because they feel as if, as a child, I deserve this, I want this, why should you have it and I can't have it? It's those dynamics that come into play. And so consequently, you have these clashes that seem insurmountable. And everybody wants the adult in the room to stand up. The unfortunate thing is that the adults in the room are simply the bigger bullies compared to everybody else. Does that make sense?
No, I mean it actually, if you put it in that perspective, everything makes complete sense.
And so consequently, again, I think that everybody wants their way. And what's interesting is I forget the guy's name who wrote this, but in Psychology Today, in the Psychology of Money, I think it's Morgan Housebowl or something like that. One of the things he talked about, which I thought was very interesting, he says that coming out of World War II, there were only 3 television stations. And with the advent of credit, you had people who were living prior to World War II, everybody lived within their means. So if you were wealthy, you lived a wealthy lifestyle. If you were poor, but you lived within your means. After World War II, and with the advent of credit and the fact that you only had 3 television stations, people were living a lifestyle that was above their means. And that over time, it got to the point where I deserve and I should have the same lifestyle as someone who's rich, even though I can't afford that lifestyle.
Keeping it
And
up
once
with
that
Jones.
keeping up with the Joneses, and once that lifestyle is no longer attainable, again, the child comes out. I need that. Why can't I have? You have to give me this. You have to, so we've lost, I think, the sense of working towards something, sacrificing now for the long term, and being willing to accept the fact that maybe there are things that are a little bit outside of our reach right now. That's going to take a lot longer than we kind of hope that it does, and then kind of go through those scars to make it happen.
Julio, you bring up a lot of interesting and good points over here. And then, yeah, like this concept of I think that a lot of people are looking for a quick fix to the country, but what we should be looking on is, as you said, looking into the mirror. Because I remember this one show, this one comedian I used to watch a lot. His name was George Carlin. And then he basically he did it in his way. Like he was like, oh, people every 4 years people are voting for these things, and then he was like, where do these politicians come from? They don't come from the skies. They don't come from another dimension. They basically come from American homes with American families. So like
Right.
they rise from that. So if we as a nation are selfish and self-centered and are childlike, our politicians will end up being that way over a period of time. So I guess the solution is, I think, a long-term solution of a grassroots kind of thing where we change culture and society. And then overall, but ultimately people are looking for a quick fix. But that's my
No,
take.
I think you're absolutely right. And just sort of a side note on George Carlin, he attended my high school years before me. He ended up leaving, and he always regrets it. But Cardinal Hayes High School in the Bronx. But I think to your point, I think that um, I think sometimes we're trying so hard to use a baseball analogy. We're trying so hard to hit a grand slam that we're not hitting singles. And so I think that oftentimes we hear this notion about young people, certainly people my age. I think every generation does this. Young people don't understand. Young people don't understand. Well, young people are they're just replicating what they're taught in the home, right? And so I think that if everyone started with their own families, their own children, their own grandchildren, and really start to impart wisdom and let it sink in, eventually it is all going to connect. I remember a friend of mine who lived at the time in Dallas. He was raising 3 girls, and he was very frustrated raising, at the time they were all teenagers. And he had a friend sit him down, and she said, listen, Ron, he says, they hear you. You have to keep telling them they hear you. They just don't want to acknowledge it to you. He says, it'll register and you'll see. And sure enough, years later, he was able to see that it all registered. And I think my pastor one time made a comment. He said, grandparents, you need to be involved in your grandchildren's lives. Because as a parent, you're so concerned about raising your child. Sometimes you don't love them enough. You love them, but you don't show it enough because you're so concerned about being a parent. And you're so concerned about making sure that they have food, they're protected, and you worry when you become a grandparent, you realize there were things that you worried about as a parent that simply weren't important. You know, whether it's toys are all over, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, you want a neat house, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, right? You want your kids to grow very confident. You want them to feel really good about themselves and let the natural talent kind of take care of itself. But the thing about being a grandparent is you have knowledge and you have to impart that knowledge to your grandchildren. I take it back. You have experience, whereas as a parent, you have knowledge, but you don't really have the kind of experience and the lessons from those experiences that you can really pass on. You kind of limit in terms of what you do. And I think the more that we kind of we pass on that knowledge and that experience and concentrate on making sure that we take care of our own, I think eventually it bubbles out because people will see each of them and it'll build out from there. All right, so I'll give you an example, kind of a transition into entrepreneurship. I began learning about entrepreneurship when years ago I became an Amway distributor, and I read a book by Robert Kiyosaki called
Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Rich Dad Poor Dad, but it was also it was a book where he just, I forget right now, Business of the 21st Century. We talked about network marketing as a business. And then all of a sudden, my mind started thinking differently about things. And then I read cash flow quadrants. And so now, when I look at things, when I look at finances and even politics, I look at it through the lens of the cash flow quadrant with the underpinning of, you know, we're kids in adult bodies.
Wow.
And I'm able to see things differently than I did before. I'm able to understand things better. And even as my faith has increased, I don't get as caught up in the politics as much as I ask God what's the lesson he wants me to learn. And usually it's outside the box. I'm not very popular with some people because I think outside the box. I've always been that way, right? And so now I take that, and so I learned, and out of necessity, I had to become an entrepreneur. So I learned that I really enjoyed it, but I also learned about how we are not just taught about how money's made, but the misconception that we have about money and about even the role that the government plays for money. I just finished reading a book from the Rich Dad series called uh, tax wealth, strategy. I think off the top of my head, I can probably move my computer and get the title of it. But one of the things the guy said was, and also one of the bellwether audios that Andrea, I forget her last name, did, is that the government actually wants you to take advantage of all of these tax benefits. You know, because it's all because our country was geared was founded by entrepreneurs, and so the tax structure favors entrepreneurs. And people don't know this. And one of the things that Andrea said that was shocking to me, but she said, if you have a W-2 job and you're earning $30,000 or more a year, you need a side business. Whatever that side business may be, because taxes will kill you, right? So now what I'm doing is my wife and I are teaching our granddaughters to think this way now, to think about asset development. We got them the Kiyosaki games. My middle granddaughter makes beads. I have one of the beads on right now. And she tells me, they call me Pop. She says, Pop, I'm going to make you this bead. It's going to cost you this much money. I get no breaks as a grandfather, right? She charges me for the beads, right? And she had this idea about doing something else. And she said, well, I have to charge them $5 per item. And I said, why? That's a little thing there. She said, my time is valuable. She's 9 years old, right? So when you start changing, when you start imparting that experience, that wisdom that you have, and get it to that next generation, I think that's when you start seeing things change. You know, so you do those singles, you do those little things one by one, and eventually it's the power of one. I call it the power of one. You can't get to two without starting at one. And one leads to two, and two leads to three, and it just kind of, moves from there.
Julio, I love how you put structure and put all of this because it's really true. Like, and I want to let you know that I have also read that book, The Cash Flow Quadrant, and I realized that yeah, you're divided into the entrepreneurs, business people, and the investors on one side, and then you have like the self-employed and then the working class on the other side. And yeah, the tax system is designed to support the people that are doing business altogether. And it goes and here's the thing, right? Instead of like us looking to politicians, if us as Americans basically start investing in ourselves and in our own financial education, and basically we followed a system of like respecting each other in spite of their opposing views and all of that, then it'll automatically create a massive change. But it has to be done on a grassroots level, right? Because there is no
Yeah. And it has to be done on an individual basis inside the home, and then it builds out from there. Regardless of how your home is structured, it has to be built out from there. And I think, but it also is important. I'm at the age now where I have enough experience that I can pass some of that wisdom on. So when I was coming through those political ranks, there weren't a whole lot of people who looked like me, who I could turn to and say, "Oh, I see myself in you," if you will. I had people help me along the way, and maybe there were more people there than I thought there were, but maybe I just wasn't mature enough to understand it. But I do know that I am now at a position where there are where there are people who may look like me or come from the same background, then I can relate to what their experiences are, and I can at least share the knowledge that I've, my experiences over the years, to kind of make it a little easier for them. And certainly, my son sent me a text one time and he said, Dad, now I understand why you did all the stuff that you do, because he's worked for American Express. Because I'm dealing with all kinds of people, and now I understand why you did all the stuff that you do. Because now I feel like I'm prepared to be able to handle all these different people. When I did the stuff in Baltimore, the guy that I work with in Baltimore, he says if a gnat will stand still for a second, Julio will talk to it. Because I have no problem talking to people. And I think getting back to, I think one of the points that you made earlier is that, I think again, going back to the notion about being children in real estate, I see this all the time. And you made a point about education. People don't want to invest in their education, or they look at it as an expense as opposed to an investment. And I find people in real estate, well, I want to make money in real estate, but I have no money. Okay, well, how do you expect to make money in real estate? I mean, there are ways you can purchase properties with money down, but I just don't like talking to people who that's the first thing they say out of their mouth. I prefer talking to people. Look, Julio, I don't have a whole lot of money, but I really want to invest in real estate. How can I go about doing that? Because at least they understand that there is an investment that's necessary. And you have to invest in yourself. Self-education is the most important investment that you can make. And then you invest in others. And then the combination of the two, as it applied in the area that you want to apply it to, will then create the fuel that will allow you to accomplish what you want to accomplish.
Julio, that is what Extraordinary America is aspiring to do. Because I know that like politicians, they're like con men. Like they'll promise you stuff and then they're not going to really do anything. So we have to invest in our own education, and we got to invest in like our own understanding, and like we have to come from a higher state of consciousness while interacting with others, and that's how the ripple effect happens, right? We invest in ourselves, then we invest in the people around us, and then all of a sudden like a subtle change happens from the ground up, and it's like it's not a quick fix, it's a long-term kind of thing. But that's what
Yes,
Extraordinary America aspires to do.
that's awesome. That's awesome. And then one thing I will say about politicians, I think most politicians, are actually doing what the people who elected them told them to do. I think the challenge is, I think that they're not using that adult child kind of notions. I think politicians are trying to be friends as opposed to be leaders. As a parent, you're supposed to lead your children. You're not supposed to be their best friend. I think politicians have lost the desire or the willingness to lead and to tell basically their constituents what you're saying doesn't make any sense at all, and we can't do that. When I going through the ranks, when I first represented mayors and city council people, we used to have what we called our legislative conference in March, where we'd have elected officials come in and we'd have them lobby Congress on issues that we thought were important to cities and communities. And I remember I met this one group of people, wonderful group of people, nicest people in the world. They're from some place in the South. It was a small town in the South. Quote unquote, simple people. And I remember saying to myself, these people were elected by their constituents, right? And again, nice people, not sophisticated people in the world. And I realized that elected officials, they're elected, the people who elect them want them to be the way that they are, right? And so if you're a Democrat in power right now, you elected people that you wanted them to do X, Y, and Z towards Republicans, and vice versa, right? And again, the stalemate is because everybody wants their way, they can't get to that big picture. So the more that people start to coalesce around the big picture, which is that, we're a country that was founded on the principle of freedom. We're a flawed country because that freedom was built on the backs of people who were denied freedom. In fact, as I often say, freedom, the greatest threat to freedom is not socialism, it's not communism, it's freedom itself. Because freedom affords you the luxury of being ignorant, right? Because we're a country founded on the principle of freedom that gave tyranny free rein. That's what slavery was, it was tyranny. And you can see a direct relationship between the U.S. system of slavery all the way through the Holocaust in the 20th century, right? And so if a country founded on freedom can allow tyranny to grab hold of itself, freedom isn't safe anywhere in the world. And I think people are operating under the assumption that we'll always be free, but they don't understand how easy it is for your minds to be tricked into allowing things that will actually enslave you. Wow. Without realizing it. Part of it is financial, part of it is political, because again, you want your way and you'll listen to anybody who will tell you what you want to hear. And politicians get very good, to your point, to tell you what you want to hear, the really good ones. And the ones who tell you what you need to know, they're usually the ones that people don't elect because they want their way. They say they want a leader, but leaders tell you what you need to know, not what you want to hear.
Julio, this actually this actually gives me it reminds me of an analogy of in dating, right? There's a saying that like when when I was in like college and high school, like there's always these attractive girls that always talk about they want the good guy, they want the good man, but then they always end up with the bad boys that tell them what they want to hear, and give them sweet, flowery promises of the future, and then they always bring them down. And then the good men are like, "Hey, man, give us a chance." They're like, "Yeah, I want a good guy," but then when the time comes, they friend zone those people. So it like reminds me of like this political sphere where the constituents are saying, "Hey, we want a good leader. We want a good leader. We want a good man. We want honest, moral leaders and everything." But when they try to come up in the system, they can't, because the only people that can come up in such a system right now are the narcissistic bad boy types. They'll tell you what you want to hear. And so the good, so that's what came to my mind. But tell me if I'm wrong in my assessment.
No. I think you're right. And then I think that, if you're a person of faith, I think part of the challenge is differentiating between what is really something that's faith-based versus something that is using faith as a weapon, as the weapon of choice, right? And I think that, again, I became a Christian during the time that I was in politics, and slowly, I think what God was doing was showing me that the biggest lessons that I learned typically were in the areas that I thought that was just the opposite of what I was thinking, if you will, right? And so, because I don't believe that God teaches you in your comfort zone, he teaches you outside of your comfort zone, right? Because he has, in order for you to grow spiritually, he has to challenge you and he has to put you in situations where you have to sit back and say, whoa, what was that? Right. And so I think that I think that I still believe that the greatest chapters in US history has yet to be written. America's greatness is never in its past, it's always in its future. Because every day you wake up, you have a shot. Every day is a new day. Not people in another country can say that. Whether you are abject poverty, living in the streets, or you're in the mansion on the hill, every day is a new day, and you have a shot. There are people in countries that don't have a shot. And so America's greatness is always in its future, it's never in its past. And people have to stop looking to the past because, and politicians are good with this, politicians know that people will expend more time, more effort, more energy recapturing the certainty of the past than they will to explore the uncertainty of the future.
Wow.
And when you and so consequently, everybody's always looking back to try and recapture the past, when what they really should be doing is using the past as the past is really what is it, is a prologue to the present, and the present is a prelude to the future. And so that's why you have to constantly, as it's talked about, bellwether, you have to have a vision, you have to have an idea of where you're going. And it doesn't matter what your age is. You always have to constantly have a vision that is moving you forward, particularly as you get older, because you want to keep your mind active. There are tons of businesses that were started by people who were over 50, 60 years old. I think Home Depot was one of them. Kentucky Fried Chicken is the most famous one. McDonald's is another one. And so that keeps your mind active, but you always want to have a vision, because you never know who's looking at you. You never know who's watching your steps and the impact that you have just by observation.
The last part you said is so true, because a lot of people, like, they go about their lives like they're doing their things and everything, but they don't realize that maybe they could be inspiring somebody else, or
That's
then
right.
the two or three people they're watching what you're doing, and you wouldn't even know about it until, like, most of the times you wouldn't even realize. Like,
No, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Most of us are going to impact people that we will never meet, that we will never know about, because of the one person that we helped, who helped one person, who helped one person. I remember a story a friend of mine told me, and my friend is African American, and he worked for a corporation in Dallas. And he was talking to a coworker, and the coworker happened to be white. And the guy was saying, "Listen, I really just can't thank you enough for helping me. And what can I do? Is there anything I can do?" And my friend said, "Listen, it's something was my pleasure. I've had help along the way, but the only thing that I ask is that you're going to come a time where there might be a Black individual who's going to need your help. All I ask is that you give them help when they need it." He said, "Absolutely, I'll do it." Now, just that statement alone, generations of people are going to benefit from that. One guy helping another person, and because of the racial dynamics in this country, it's significant that two people were able to connect as human beings, but also recognize some of those dynamics, and to be able to use that as a bridge to kind of overcome that down the road. And I think that, again, I think that we're a country that its greatness is in its future. It's always in its future. It's never in its past. And we always have to keep our eyes on the prize in the future. And again, we have to constantly strive and strive and strive for something. Be careful who we share our vision with, because not everybody understands that. But just the example has a ripple effect on everybody else.
no, I'm a big believer of the ripple effect, like whatever our actions happen, like it'll ultimately ripple, like not just to different people, but also across time. And we have to be aware of what we're passing down to, like, our children and our grandchildren, because the
Right.
way we act now will determine the way these, because they're just going to look at their parents and their grandparents. They're going to see what they're doing, and then they will learn from that, you know?
That's exactly right. And that's why someone like yourself, do you have any children yourself?
Right now, no.
No. That's why you need to be intentional right now with how you want to impact your children and your grandchildren. To be intentional right now. Because when you're young, you want to have a good time, you want to enjoy life. You're not as intentional as you need to be in understanding that decisions you make right now are going to affect generations down the road.
No, totally. But Julio, there's one question I wanted to ask you, like based on your background, right? Like you have been in politics where you've dealt with immigration, and you've also been an entrepreneur and a CEO, right? So American identity has been founded on the entrepreneurial immigrant identity. But right now, on a national standpoint, do you think that are we living up to that identity? And what's your perspective on this altogether?
I think that immigrants more so than quote unquote American born individuals I think they're bringing the entrepreneurial spirit back to America. I think immigrants have for lack of a better description, they have a hustle mentality, right? Not getting into the politics of immigration, but people who come here, all they do is they come here for that opportunity, right? They come here because they want to wake up and they want to change their lives. And the way that they do it is they work their butts off, right? And many of them start businesses. When I was representing, local governments, one of the things that struck me, there was an article in, I think it was Alabama, about the fact that there's one small town in Alabama, of all places, 80% of the new businesses in this community were started by Hispanics, right? And first they kind of do those things for themselves, right? Whether it's these little food trucks going around to the workers and providing home cooked meals to the workers, whether it's opening up a restaurant or cleaning business, but they come in with the entrepreneurial drive, right? And sometimes we get upset with that because we don't have that same drive, right? But they're bringing that back, and I think that it's that energy that we need to take advantage of and learn from. Like going back to the idea about learning how money is made, because this is where the future, I think, of America is. And I think that I know there are some people who have some concerns about how the increase in diversity in the country, and there's a whole set of issues behind that. But I think the immigrant communities are the ones that are driving and fueling, I think, a lot of the entrepreneurship that's taking place in the country. I think we need to learn that. We need to take advantage of it, and we need to encourage that as much as possible.
Like I would also like to add, like even like for people that have been born here, like we're not just an immigrant nation, we're descendants of immigrants.
Right,
America was
that's right.
founded, and it was founded on the entrepreneurial spirit and people coming from faraway places. America was not always like this. Like people had to hustle and work hard and build
Right.
bridges and buildings, and they had to go westwards and basically populate the entire continent before we became the nation that we had to become. And it was all
No,
because of this.
absolutely.
Yeah,
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it was because
Yeah.
of that.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it was because of this identity, right? Like we had a particular identity, and that's what made us extraordinary in the first place. And so, yeah, that's what comes
Yeah,
to my
yeah.
mind.
And I don't. Again, I don't think America ever lost its greatness. I just don't. I know there's some people who do. I just think because America's greatness is always in its future, not its past, and it's always in the fact that you have hope. And I know some people have lost hope, and I'm not discounting that. I'm not diminishing that in any way. I'm not dismissing their feelings of hopelessness. I think those are very real and need to be dealt with. But again, I think America's greatness is always in the fact that every day you wake up, it's a new day, and you get to start all over again. And there's no limit to what you can do. Some people when former President Barack Obama was elected president, that was I think the first time that the country truly demonstrated you can do anything in the country. And now some people might say otherwise, but I know people, certainly me, I never really expected in my lifetime to see a Black man president. And I think most people, in all honesty, would say they never expected it. In fact, I know people who openly said, oh, he's not going to they're going to kill him before they elect him president.
Wow.
Because again, because of the history of the country, right? And so that, again, I'm not saying anything about his politics or anything like that. Whatever his politics are, they were. Whatever you think about his politics, they were. But the idea that we went from a country that enslaved Black men to elect a Black man, the most powerful person on earth, says exactly how great this country is and how it's created, I think, a sense of belief that, hey, maybe I can do more than I thought I did. I wish I can find this interview of a 10-year-old little Black boy in Louisiana when he was asked, what do you think about Barack Obama being elected president? And he stood there and he said, for the first time in my life, I really believe I can do something with my life. And then he sat down. When you see yourself in the history books, when you see yourself in images, you can be yourself. When you see others, you can free yourself of a lot of the biases that have held you back from getting together with people. That's why it's important that history reflect, really what people look like, so that, we can see each other. And once we see each other, then we can start connecting with each other and start recognizing who we are and respecting who we are, what our difference is, physically, culturally, spiritually, politically, whatever the case may be. And I'm a believer that faith-based people connect, regardless of what your belief is. Faith-based people who believe in their higher power and believe in that golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, they connect and they don't have conflicts because they understand the value of people. And when you understand the value of people, then you appreciate that individual for who they are and what they bring to the table.
No, totally, Julio. I couldn't agree more. Like faith is an important factor, like our understanding of a higher power, like because there's something that always unites us. And there's one thing that I wanted to also add, right? Like with regards to like the concept of race, like you gotta realize, like to like my audience, that when you die, you're no longer going to be brown or black or white.
Right.
Like this is only a temporary construct. Your body is temporary and life is impermanent. So there's an eternity out there, and us dividing ourselves based on race makes absolutely no sense to me.
It's a man-made construct. There's no question about it. And
because when you're dead, you're all of the same race. I mean, I don't get it,
Right. Well, I'm a believer that God wants us to be in the physical what he expects us to be in the spiritual, right? And so when if we look at flowers, if God wanted all the flowers to look the same, there wouldn't be red roses and yellow roses and pink roses. There's beauty in all of the color spectrum. Exactly. And I think that's what God wanted us to recognize. And he wanted us to recognize we're supposed to be, as a Christian, I believe that we're God's greatest creation. And so it doesn't make sense for us to deny the beauty of the greatest creation. My wife's a painter. No one goes to a museum and complain about the colors. Why is this red? Why is this yellow? No, you go there and you admire the colors and what they bring to the canvas. And I believe that that's what God wants us to do, is to look at each other. Your complexion is different, in some cases different, similar. Your features are different. God wants me to respect you and how you look and appreciate and see him in you, and for you to see me in him. See, him and me, right, you know?
Yeah.
And when we do that, when we understand that, then we understand that this whole division by race is a man-made construct to deny the spiritual connection that God wants each of us to have. And then we just build on that spiritual connection, and then we respect who it's, again, Bellwether does that, and there are others as well. But I think that I think that's the main thing, that God wants us to be in the physical what He wants us to be in the spiritual. And to your point, when we get to heaven or whatever we believe the afterlife is, we're these spirits that are going to connect, and our ability to connect is just going to be a reflection of how we were in the physical. Because again, in order to get spiritually, you got to, like kids, you teach kids in the physical, you don't teach them in the mental until they're mature enough to be able to understand the mental. So
No, I mean you couldn't have said it any better. That was amazing. The flower analogy with the different colors, like yeah,
yeah,
it's so true. Yeah.
yeah.
That that
It's
is
all
that is
good.
that is an awesome analogy. I'm glad that you brought it up. So so Julio, are there any projects that you're doing right now that you want the audience to get a glimpse into?
Yeah, the main thing is I'm connecting potential investors with properties that might be available all over the country. So I've been able to, I have connections all over the country because of the various works that I've done. So if anybody's looking to get involved in real estate, I'm more than happy to talk with them, kind of walk them through the process, and kind of help them understand how to navigate that. As I also get on the sort of the protective side with the firearm, I'm going to look to do some trainings nationally on personal safety and how to protect yourself. And if anybody wants to do the firearm part, that's fine as well. But basically, it's really helping people to have a better understanding and how to be conscious about your surroundings so you can keep yourself safe and away from harm. I'm still working through my website and working through my media kit, if you will. I'm a little slow when it comes to those sort of things. I'm gonna be very particular about what I want to do. So the best way is for people really to contact me through LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect with me. And yeah, go from there.
That's great, Julio. And so Julio, how can the audience oh yeah, so they'll connect with
I
you
can do
saying,
LinkedIn. I can give you my phone number. If people text me beforehand, that'd be great. That's usually the best way to reach me, actually. It's 240-381-6311. And they can reach out to me and just say that, Cosmos sent them, and I'll know to take care of them.
that is awesome, Julio. And Julio, I'm so glad that you took the time to come on the show and share your perspective of the world because it's so amazing and it's pretty great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm honored that you asked me to participate. I truly am blessed to be here. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would definitely love to have you here at a later time,
And
because
that'd be awesome. That would be awesome.
I want to conclude this episode by letting my fellow extraordinary Americans know that, hey, look, there's an extraordinary within each and every one of us. And it's our duty to awaken it and unleash it. Until next time, bye for now. Hey there, everyone. Thank you for watching Extraordinary America. If you like what you see, please do subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Remember that the best investment that you can make in your lifetime is in your own financial education, for it is knowledge that truly sets you free. Also, remember that your purchasing power is being diluted through inflation, and then the practical thing to do is to protect the loss of your purchasing power by investing in precious metals or the right cryptocurrencies. Also, never forget that you are an extraordinary American. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.